The 1983–1984 UOL regulations provided that a candidate for a research degree would be registered initially for the M.Phil degree. A student registered for the M.Phil degree would be permitted to transfer to registration for the PhD, and the school or institute might permit such transfer on the recommendation of the supervisor, and should so inform the university. LSE's school regulations had similar regulations. Should the supervisors of a student registered for the M.Phil consider that the student's work is of doctoral standard, the student may on their recommendation and with the permission of school be transferred to registration for the PhD degree. Based on these provisions, the registration transfer from M.Phil to PhD in the early 1980s was an activity at LSE, and LSE had the authority to permit the transfer. VV and Ing-Wen Tsai were first registered as M.Phil students at LSE in October 1980. VV's supervisor recommended VV's registration transfer from M.Phil to PhD on October 11, 1982. Ian Stevenson, secretary of the LSE Graduate School, notified VV about the approval of her registration transfer on October 18, 1982. Based on Stevenson's notification letter, in the early 1980s, the supervisor's recommendation for registration transfer had to be sent to the Graduate School Committee for approval. Upon approval, VV's registration for the PhD was backdated to October 1980. VV's LSE student file confirms the registration transfer procedure provided in the UOL and LSE regulations in the early 1980s. It was a three-step procedure. Registration transfer recommended by the supervisor, registration transfer approved by the Graduate School Committee, and notification of the approval by the LSE Graduate School. Based on the 1982–1983 LSE calendar, for the Michaelmas term, the Graduate School Committee met 3 times. October 13, 1982, November 3, 1982. And December 8, 1982. The meetings were always held on Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. According to the date of the recommendation and the notification letter, VV's registration transfer was approved by the Graduate School Committee meeting held on Wednesday, October 13, 1982, at 4:30 p.m. The approval date, October 13, was also noted on VV's supervisor's recommendation letter. Therefore, the approval of VV's registration transfer from M.Phil to PhD followed the three-step procedure. VV's supervisor recommended the transfer on October 11, 1982. 2 days later, the Graduate School Committee approved the recommendation on October 13, 1982, and the Graduate School notified VV on October 18, 1982. On December 18, 2020, Kevin Haynes answered Question 3, which was presented to him by the Taipei Representative Office in the UK. He confirmed that Michael John Elliott, Tsai's supervisor, recommended Tsai's registration transfer on February 9, 1982, and Ian Stevenson, secretary of the LSE Graduate School, confirmed to Elliott the approval on February 11, 1982. On September 23, 2019, Tsai's office disclosed a letter written by Stevenson, which also indicates that the approval of Tsai's registration transfer from M.Phil to PhD was notified on February 11, 1982. Based on Haynes' answer to Question 3 and Stevenson's letter dated February 11, 1982, Tsai's registration transfer from M.Phil to PhD was approved by the Graduate School Committee on February 10, 1982. However, the Graduate School Committee did not meet on February 10, 1982. In other words, Sai's registration transfer from MPhil to PhD was not approved by the Graduate School Committee because no committee meeting was held after Sai's supervisor recommended the transfer and before the graduate school notified Sai about the approval. Based on the 1981–1982 LSE calendar, the Graduate School Committee met on January 20, 1982, 20 days before Elliott recommended Sai's registration transfer. The Graduate School Committee met again on February 17, 1982, 6 days after Stevenson notified Sai about the approval of her registration transfer. Sai's registration transfer was approved 20 days after the Graduate School Committee met on January 20, 1982, and 6 days before the Graduate School Committee met on February 17, 1982. No committee meeting was held between February 9 and February 11, 1982, to approve Elliott's recommendation of Sai's registration transfer from MPhil to PhD. Based on these records, Sai's registration transfer from MPhil to PhD did not follow the three-step procedure. On September 3, 2019, Sue Donnelly, LSE archivist, emailed Sai's LSE student files stored in the LSE archives to Sai's office. On September 19, 2019, Sai's office submitted 11 documents found in Sai's LSE student file to the Taiwan Taipei District Prosecutor's Office as evidence of Sai's PhD. Stevenson's letter dated February 11, 1982, was one of them. On March 10, 2020, Sai's attorney requested the prosecutor's office to send 12 documents found in Sai's LSE student file to LSE for authenticating the evidence. Stevenson's letter dated February 11, 1982, was one of them. In response to the prosecutor's office's request, on July 23, 2020, Haynes found Stevenson's letter dated February 11, 1982, on page 120 of Sai's LSE student file stored in the LSE archives and verified it as authentic. On March 31, 2021, based on the documents authenticated by Kevin Haynes, the Taiwan Taipei District Prosecutor's Office indicted Dennis Peng for criminal defamation. Was Sai's registration successfully transferred from MPhil to PhD in February 1982? It was not, according to the 1983–1984 UOL regulations and the 1981–1982 LSE school regulations confirmed by VV's LSE student file. Who wrote Stevenson's notification letter about the approval of Sai's registration transfer? How and when did Stevenson's letter find its way into Sai's LSE student file stored in the LSE archives?